am going to start today by just sharing a little something with you. Any of you that know me know that I love to have a little getaway or an escape with my husband. We have very busy lives. You have very busy lives. Sometimes they're stressful lives. So any chance that we get to get away and I get them all to myself, that's kind of a favorite thing for me. And I know that Drake likes that too, but I know Drake would love to be far, far away. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the show Alone. It's on the History Channel. It's one of those Survivor kind of extreme shows, only it really is next level because there's contestants and they get brought in by a helicopter or a boat, and they're dropped off in these super remote places like the Antarctic and Vancouver Island or somewhere, and it's all before winter, and you're just by yourself with maybe 10 things to build shelter, build fire, and feed yourself. Me, I probably wouldn't even, I wouldn't get on a helicopter in the first place, but I would not get off the boat because I would see what I was going to be left with. But Drake, I think a scenario like that, it just pulses through his veins, and he would love that. But I also know that he would settle just to live on a hill somewhere with no one around for miles. So I love that about him. But I just question those things sometimes because I remember it was about 20 years ago, and we were moving from Kaiser, and that's the city, not the hospital, to Hillsboro. People get confused on that. But we were moving from the city of Kaiser to the city of Hillsboro. And as we were looking for our house, Drake asked, "Hey, what do you think about living on property?" And he said it'd be so great. We could have chickens and llamas. And I have to confess that I didn't even really let him finish talking about the Chehalem Mountains or anywhere in Newburgh. I just straight up said no. And in my defense, I would like to point out that the whole point of moving to Hillsboro was to be closer to his office. I mean, we would be leaving my family and any support that I had for our kids who were very little at the time. And back then, I thought it was a really good day if they got up, got dressed, and got fed 3 meals. That was a win. So the thought of having to feed live farm animals on top of that or anything like that was just way more than my brain could handle. I think really I was just afraid of being alone and isolated. So we moved to Hillsboro, and I was talking to Drake this morning. I think we were like maybe 10 stoplights away from his office. But for me, that felt safe. But looking back, I can see now that my fear was really more fear of the unknown. But the reality is, our world is a world of unknowns, and that can create a fear in our personal lives that can be paralyzing. And fear is a terrible cycle. It's not fun, but I do believe that it is one that we can change. And we can change it because that is not the way God designed for us to operate. We can listen to what Isaiah 41:13 says because it makes it really clear. "For I am the Lord your God, who takes a hold of your right hand and say to you, 'Do not fear. I will help you.'" And I love the promise of security in that, which brings me to what I'm going to talk to you about today, and that is Esther, or Queen Esther, and how she handled fear of the unknown. And I got to tell you, she is one of my very favorite all-time Bible heroines, and another one that I can't wait to meet in heaven someday. And I wish that I could tell you her whole story because it's full of drama. It's that kind of on the edge of your seat drama, though, not the reality TV kind of drama. I don't do that. That's not fun for me. But Esther's story is full of excitement and plot twists and turns and extravagance and beauty and so much more. But in the interest of time, I'm only going to share a couple of highlights with you today and point out how she functioned in her fear with faith. So, to begin, she gave up her life, a place that was familiar to her, to go live in a palace that was not her home. So she was leaving behind her family and all of the things that she already knew, all because the Persian king Xerxes decided he needed a new queen. So he basically holds a beauty pageant. He brings in all of these beautiful girls from all around all of the kingdoms just so he can choose one. One of these girls is Esther. But as she enters the kingdom, her uncle Mordecai tells her to keep a very big secret about her identity. And I'm going to tell you what that is in just a minute. But the process of selecting this queen, from how I understand it, was really long. I mean, it could take like up to a year. And Esther, throughout this time, wins a lot of favor, and ultimately she's chosen to be queen. And you would think that at this point that she has it all made. I mean, she's married to a king. Granted, he's a little eccentric and maybe a little crazy and impulsive, but presumably she's living this lavish, extravagant life, and a life that seems like it is safe behind the palace gates. But fast forward, and there's one of those plot twists I told you about. And in one of Xerxes' crazy, impulsive moments, he agrees to pass a decree to kill all of the Jews. But here's what he didn't know. Queen Esther, his wife, was Jewish. So this whole time that she'd been living in the kingdom, she was keeping her Jewish heritage a secret. That's what her uncle Mordecai told her to keep secret. But with this edict in place, he now changes his mind and says, actually, could you go tell the king who you really are, and maybe him knowing that you are Jewish will save all of our people? So kind of think of it like this. For those of you who are familiar with Disney and Frozen and Elsa, I know she's popular. I'm sorry, I don't really love Frozen, but I get how popular she is. But Princess Elsa was born with magical powers, and she's forced to conceal these powers, and she's afraid of what could happen if anybody finds out about them for the people that she loves. But in the end, she's forced to reveal those powers, and she saves her kingdom, and it's all happily ever after in Arendelle because it's Disney. But for Esther, it seems like it shouldn't be that big of a deal, because Xerxes is her husband, but her husband is unpredictable in kind of a scary way. And he has decrees in place that if you go against them, it can cost you your life. So for example, in this case, if you were to approach the king and he didn't summon you, and then he refused to see you, that was it for you. You were going to die. So now, that sense of security that Esther was presumably living, that becomes a false sense of security. And she's put in the position to be forced to potentially lose everything. I mean, her prestige, her power, her privilege, the palace. But more than that, she is forced to face death. Now, imagine if this were you. If you are forced to give up everything, and maybe you think, I don't really have that much, but it doesn't matter. Anything you give up, if you have to give up everything, you're still giving up everything. And that can be, those things are considered to be idols. And we find security in those things, even those things like money, food, our career, our kids. We even find security in how well our kids are doing. I remember when my kids were little, if they weren't doing well, I would worry. If I'm honest, I thought it was a reflection on me and I'm not a good mom, but I'm not doing that as much now that they're older, only sometimes. But I think it's just really easy to read over or hear the story of Esther and just not think about what that really looks like in our own lives. I mean, maybe we're not facing life-threatening events, but most of us definitely face life-changing events. And I'm sure that Esther had all sorts of what-if questions going on in her mind at Mordecai's appeal. And maybe it took her a minute, but I kind of just envisioned her standing there and just summoning up her courage, and maybe standing just a little bit taller, and then talking to she didn't talk back to Mordecai. She spoke to Mordecai and told him in Esther chapter 4, "Go, gather all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it's against the law. And if I perish, I perish." Those are not words that I say every day. I don't know if I've ever said, if I perish, I perish. It sounds kind of dramatic, but for her it was real. But I do know that I struggle with clinging to feeling in control. And I think that's why I was afraid to move to that hill with Drake and our kids. I've shared in the past that I grew up feeling like I really didn't have a lot of control in a lot of ways, and I felt isolated. So besides not knowing the first thing about feeding chickens or llamas, I felt like I was gonna lose my security by being away from things that are convenient, like stores, Starbucks. I mean, let's be real. And if I'm being really honest, that was a time period for me when I was alone with the kids a lot because Drake was working so hard for us to build his practice, and I just wanted to be in a nice, comfortable place, which I'm not super proud of that now, but I didn't trust where Drake was leading our family. And I do that same thing with God all the time. There are times that I can sense him planting seeds of change in me, and I don't like that. I'm afraid of change. We're not friends, me and change. I'm afraid of losing things that are familiar to me, like my home, relationships. I am just afraid of failure. That's probably why I haven't started that blog yet that Pastor Rudy just told you about that nobody else knew about. Thanks. But sometimes I'm even afraid to speak out about my identity as a Christian. I mean, for the most part, I speak very freely about my faith and who I am. But I will confess that there are times that I hesitate before I might say something, or I might post or share something on social media because I think, okay, wait, if I say that and someone sees that, then what are they going to think? And I just start doing all of these scenarios. And so as much as I proclaim my faith, sometimes I might actually edit or conceal certain circumstances about it. Interestingly, the name Esther means hidden one. So if you think about it, in her story, she was hiding her true identity, just like we try to hide from or avoid situations, like in those idle things that I was talking about. But as Jesus followers, we are not immune to hard times. We're not immune to challenges or suffering, but I think that we want to hide from those or avoid them or sometimes just numb ourselves. And we retreat to places like Netflix. I mean, especially during COVID, did y'all see that meme that went around that said, well, I finished Netflix today? That is a lot of escaping to watch all of Netflix. Or for me, there's Amazon. And it's kind of a hiding place for me. I mean, I feel like I can get things done. Drake doesn't know this yet, but I just bought freezer bins because in my mind, I can organize our freezer, and he's probably rolling his eyes back there right now because he's like, great, we need more bins. But it's really easy for me to avoid things and feel like I have control over something when I can go, find a thing, place the order, and it comes. Because it feels like I'm actually accomplishing something when I can't accomplish things in other situations. Like in this one, I'm pretty sure I was supposed to be working on my message and I just got stressed, so I shopped. So that's an escape for me. But I know some of you like gaming. Gaming is not my thing. Although we did just get an Oculus Quest 2. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a virtual reality game thing. It's really cool. Totally not skilled at it, and I may or may not have gotten motion sickness in one of the games where it dropped me to my knees. But it's fun, and it's really easy to lose yourself in the different games. But ironically, even though it's virtual reality, it's just another escape. And here's the hard truth. All of those places that we go to hide, they're only temporarily safe. And here's another little tidbit, or a fun fact, as my son likes to call it. Our safety is so important to us that we spend billions of dollars every year on it. Things like cybersecurity, Wi-Fi security, home security. And while those things are important and even sometimes necessary, a lot of the times they just end up being distractions that rob us from opportunity. Opportunities that God puts in place for us. Opportunities to trust God. Because if our security is rooted in a thing, then we're not really functioning in our faith. John 10:7-10 says it like this. Therefore, Jesus said again, very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal, and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I love that last part. It's really beautiful, but I want you to listen to this part. All who have come before me, so those things like money and our career and our kids, and the ways that we avoid facing the fear of losing those idols, like Netflix and Amazon, they are the thieves and robbers. And here's another scary fact, and sources kind of vary on this, but we spend 3 to 7 hours a day in front of our screens. And I am really terrible at math, but somebody somewhere did the math, and the equivalent of that is the same as 33 to 44 years of our lives that we spend in front of our screen avoiding things. And those hours or years, those are the things that rob us from God's opportunity for us. And that, when you really think about that, just makes you go, man, and I said I don't even have 15 minutes to work out. But it's just sad. Because we have a thief who comes only to steal and kill and destroy. Those are the words in Scripture that actually really scare me, because we have a very real enemy, and he is no joke. He does want to steal our God-given opportunities and our lives. But I also know this, and I am wrapping it up here. In the same way that we don't see God mentioned in the book of Esther, his presence is just very much there. I mean, look at what she did. She fasted, and fasting is just taking that moment to stop and restrict ourselves from things and like those idols. And I even have to ask myself, is my sense of security directing me away from God, or am I looking to him through the lens of my faith? I mean, for Esther, fasting just had to have given her the clarity that brought God into her situation. And I trust that even in the midst of all of the chaos and the challenges in our lives, God is so here. He's so present. And his presence dwells in us. It dwells in you every day, always. It's a promise. It's a promise. And it makes me emotional because that's a really big promise. I also know that we can look to Esther's character and we can become an influence in the same way that she influenced in her era. She faced her challenges and she took risks, and we can do the same just like her. And she made those sacrifices. She faced danger. She faced death. But she stepped out in her faith in the midst of fear, in the midst of difficulty, in the midst of opposition, and ultimately, and this is a spoiler alert, but she saved her people. After her famous words, "If I perish, I perish," she did risk all of her security, and she went to the king. And there's a lot more plot, twists, turns, and drama and all of that. But ultimately, she saves her people, and she's still celebrated for that today. Like I said, her example is really a really good example for us to follow. Because God takes us seriously. He takes you seriously. And we need to take him seriously. We need to listen and not be afraid to function in our faith, in our fear. I can't even think right now. I got all emotional about that one thing. I'm sorry. But we do. We need to listen to God and not be afraid to function in our fear through our faith. Because I trust that his Spirit leads us, it equips us, it inspires us, and we can handle all of the things that we can only do through him. I think our stories are our very own bestseller, and they are written by the author of our lives. Listen to Philippians 1:6. And so am I sure that God, who began this good work in you, will carry it out until it is finished on the day of Jesus Christ. That's going to be an awesome day. I'd like to close with this quote from Richard Rohr. He's a Franciscan priest, and where he's referencing Shakespeare in this. "Our doubts are traitors," Shakespeare warned. There was a really big crash out there. "Our doubts are traitors," Shakespeare warned, "and make us lose the good we often might win by fearing to attempt." And I think what Roar is suggesting here is that Christians don't live by faith because they have no patience for the unknown and no tolerance for ambiguity. And I think that's really true. I know it's true for me. I also believe that we will have more clarity and faith-driven confidence in recognizing our opportunities if we anchor ourselves in prayer. We need to bring God into our situations, just like Esther brought God into hers. And I don't know what opportunities God has for you. Honestly, sometimes I don't even know what they are for me, but I do believe in trusting in one step at a time. I know Drake still has his dream to live on a hill somewhere. Part of making that happen brought us here to Forest Grove. I'm thankful for that. But I have to say, I had a lot of what if questions when we were leaving Hillsboro. I thought that was going to be our forever home. But the reality is, my forever home is in God through my faith. It's the same for you, even if our faith is just the size of that tiny little mustard seed. Because that is where we are going to experience security and confidence in Jesus. Amen. Yes, that is an amen. So I'm going to close us out with a little prayer right before we finish here, and then Pastor Rudy and Pastor Zach will do some more worship. But thanks for listening. I really hope you guys can just go out and conquer, because you can.